Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania.
Where we discuss history and haunts.
Today's story takes us to a hospital. I think this is the first hospital we've ever done. I'm Sarah.
And I'm David.
Let's get into it. So, growing up in Eastern PA and loving all things Halloween, I knew of this haunted walkthrough called Pennhurst Asylum. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
You did grow up in Georgia, so fair. I had never been there, but I always heard that it was really scary. And I thought that it was just a structure that was constructed for this haunted walkthrough. I didn't know until I started looking into paranormal places in Pennsylvania that it was actually, before called Pennhurst Asylum, which is the haunted walkthrough name, it was called Pennhurst State School and Hospital, and it was a teaching hospital. This is a controversial place. I just want to put it out there. And we're not here to comment on whether or not we think it should be a haunted attraction, etc. With a lot of places we discuss, these places have sensitive histories. We're just here to tell you about the history and the ghosts. So, this place was originally known as the Eastern Pennsylvania Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic.
There's a lot.
That's quite a name.
It's a name.
And it opened in the early 1900s. So rhetoric like that was more common in the 1900s. In addition to patients that were mentally or physically handicapped, immigrants and orphans were locked up here. And I say locked up because that's essentially what it was.
So they, brought these people in involuntarily and kind of just locked them away through the key.
Yeah, it kind of seems like you have nowhere else to go, so we're going to put you in here. People go in, but they don't come out.
That's awful.
Yeah, I mean, this was the case with a lot of hospitals, etc. at this time.
And probably leads to a lot of haunting.
Yeah. So the Institute claimed to be progressive in a time where people that were mentally ill were treated incredibly poorly. It operated completely separately from society. This place had its own power plant and its own farms, so they literally did not need to interact with society.
That's, I don't know, feels like we're setting up very much for a horror movie.
Right. I mean, it's like a cult almost. It's just completely separate. No one needs to see what's happening there, especially back in the early 1900s when standards weren't what they are today.
Yeah, you definitely just get away with doing whatever you want. Yeah, this feels like just such a premise of like a horror movie or like for a cult fan fiction.
Right, it literally is the premise of American Horror Story season 2, pretty much.
Okay, that's cool.
I don't know. No, I'm not saying that it's after this asylum necessarily, but like you'll see the similarities.
Okay.
Because the history takes us to the mid-1960s, when TV reporter Bill Baldini ran a 5-episode expose on what became called the Pennhurst State School and Hospital. So again, this is where I'm getting season 2 American Horror Story vibes, the like expose on an asylum.
Gotcha.
So this expose showed fully grown patients. Now their patients were mostly fully grown, but for some reason they were called children, despite their age, which again, it's just demeaning. So these fully grown patients had hands and feet bound by straps to adult-sized crib beds. Yeah.
What? Oh my
I was going to say, remember, they can't see your face. I know your facial expressions.
I'm staring in disbelief at adult cribs.
Yeah.
And this place would claim to be progressive for their
Progressive.
time? Oh, well,
So inmates of the institution were shown rocking, pacing, and twitching in this expose. Many were severely disabled mentally or physically, but others were quite lucid and coherent. Because as I said, there were also immigrants and orphans placed here. Even though coherent patients ended up withdrawing into themselves because of the overstimulation of their senses. This place was loud. As I said, the other patients had rocking, pacing, twitching, constantly active. There's always activity. So it was a frightening place to exist, not to mention the conditions like the adult crib beds, etc. And they played to the lowest common denominator here. So there was a lack of mental stimulation for people that were lucid. because it was essentially children's toys that they had in the rec rooms there.
This is really strange. Like,
Yeah.
of all the mental hospitals or anything along those lines I've ever heard of, never heard of like adult-sized cribs or
Right.
just being handed nothing but children's toys.
Right. Again, a reason why it's haunted. So this interviewer did get to talk to patients and doctors. And when they asked a patient what they would want most in the world if they could have everything, the patient replied to get out of Pennhurst, which is chilling in and of itself.
Oof. Yeah.
In an interview with a doctor, and this is a famous interview for people that know about this state school, the doctor was asked how he dealt with unruly patients. The doctor responded by saying that he would inject them with substances that would cause the most pain without causing permanent damage to dissuade patients from misbehaving.
Oh, so just torture.
Yeah, torture.
Just right out of the book.
So you'd think this happened in the 60s, 5-episode TV expose. This place is going to be shut down immediately. Nope. Took 2 decades of legal action before the doors finally closed, so another 20 years of torturing their patients. Currently, it's privately owned and operated as a haunted house, and the owners did take time to restore it, eliminate traces of vandalism, etc., because it did sit empty between closing in the 80s and their ownership.
Sure.
Now the ghost stories. Again, themes with all these places are terrible things happening, so no surprise that they're haunted. It's so haunted that you can actually rent the grounds for ghost hunting. They have a tagline on their website that says, "They lived here, they died here, and they are still here."
Ooh, spooky. That's a good tagline.
I know, it is good. And they play into it, obviously. It's also a haunted house.
Sure.
So we'll start with generic haunts and then get into specific ghosts. Evidence from ghost hunts include photos, videos, recordings of voice phenomena, and even personal encounters with the spirits themselves. Some common phrases that are heard are "go away," "I'll kill you," "we're upset," and "why did you come here?" It's also been heard "I'm scared" and "why won't you leave?" Which is interesting to me because it seems like a mix of angry "get out of here" and kind of like the "help me" sentiment.
Yeah, and I guess the one that really stuck out to me there was the "why did you come here?"
Yeah.
As in, like, why would you choose to come here is how I interpreted that.
That's actually a great point. Like, why would anyone opt to be here? In addition to the actual voices that are heard and recorded, there have been reports of other sounds of vomiting, crying, footsteps, and the slamming of doors. In addition to audio accounts, there are visual accounts. There's said to be shadow people seen throughout the grounds. Because remember, this is not just this hospital and just this school. This is like a compound of buildings. These shadows include what appear to be a small female child with long black hair, a hunched-over presence with long dangling arms that looks unhuman, and the upper portion of bodies are often seen partially blocked by furniture or structures. The theory behind that is that people didn't want to be seen. They wanted to fade into the background in this hospital.
Sure.
If you're outspoken, you could get tortured. So even in their afterlife, they're hiding behind furniture.
I mean, that makes sense, especially with some of the questions or the voices, what they said.
Right. In terms of actual ghosts that look like people being seen here, there's been reports of a young woman in a nurse's uniform that is roaming, seemingly still doling out medications, and a young girl roaming around that seems lost. The last category of the generic evidence or experiences is going to be what I'm calling physical evidence. So we talked about the sounds, we talked about what people have seen. These are like movements. Doors and rocking chairs have moved without anyone being near them. And while they removed the vandalism from this building, it's still very much so like a rundown old hospital. It's not like they cleaned it up, really.
Sure.
So there's still original furniture, etc. there. During one investigation, an investigator was shoved from behind hard enough that he hit a stairway and it left a deep red mark on the small of his back.
That's spooky. Like when you see investigators actually be like physically harmed
Right.
or touched in this way that leaves like a mark, that's particularly
Right.
horrifying, right?
Another investigator was scratched on the arm by an unknown object or entity because they weren't really near anything and they weren't even close to walls. So they couldn't have even scratched themselves on walls. Imagine in the middle of a room, you just have scratches on your arm.
That's weird. But did like the investigator feel like the scratch occur,
Yeah.
or did it? Okay.
Yeah. There's also been reports of objects being propelled through the air, specifically in the basement. Now we'll go to the Mayflower building, which is considered the most haunted building on the grounds. And this is where we have some well-known ghosts. First up is Howie. Howie is a young boy that likes to play with a Fisher-Price airplane. And this Fisher-Price airplane has been left there and is still there in the same room.
Okay.
There's a good reason for that. Howie does not like when you touch his airplane.
Oh.
It's said that negative things start to occur when anyone touches his airplane. People get negative feeling, they hear screaming, etc. I did watch a video of people touching the airplane, and they said they got a negative feeling. There wasn't anything else. But I certainly wouldn't touch it if I was there. And you can tell it's like a broken airplane that's covered in dust and dirt. It's clearly been there for a while.
What was this building even used for?
The Mayflower building?
Yeah.
I think
do
it
you
was
know?
just one of the hospital wards.
Gotcha.
Looking it up, it doesn't say. It just says that it's a building.
Okay.
It's like just part of the asylum.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was just wondering why it was the most haunted building. If there was like any particular reason.
I think because it housed patients, whereas they had other things like food stores, etc. So the second well-known ghost of the Mayflower building is a shadow, and it's commonly seen in bathrooms and hallways. And this shadow figure has been captured on countless photos, so you can see proof that it's there. There was an investigation to try to identify who this is, and during the investigation, through taking a series of photos, the shadow figure actually led the investigators to a cell. And when they pulled back the bed, they saw that the name Fisher was carved into one of the walls.
Oh, interesting.
So they believe that this person's name is Fisher, and they were the one that carved it. Because they hang out in the hallway of that cell block. So I'm saying cell block like it's a jail. I guess it's a patient ward. I don't know. Feels like it's a jail. And they're also seen in the bathroom that's on that unit. So it's believed that they used to live there.
Gotcha.
When you say the name Fisher in complete darkness, footsteps can be heard moving towards the room where the name is carved.
Oh, that's really spooky. This entity doesn't sound particularly negative, though.
No, and I feel like we haven't gotten to the third one yet, which is negative, but I feel like it's just people that are hurting, you know? It's not like it's overall that negative. It's just people that are scared.
Yeah, or, protective of a child's toy. In the case of Howie.
Well, it's his toy.
Yeah, so I get that. So he's not particularly negative either. Just don't touch his stuff.
Yeah, don't touch stuff. No problem. So the third one is definitely the first negative one. And it's no surprise that it's not a patient. It's a staff member. Because the staff member has such a, quote, progressive track record. So this is a particular night nurse that had malicious intentions. People touring this building have reported feeling like they are being stabbed repeatedly with needles.
Oh, no.
Like constant injections. This specifically happens in the art therapy room. And it's rumored that people were sent to this art therapy room after receiving sedatives to just kind of sit there.
Yeah, that's tough.
When paranormal investigators asked about the nurse, there were sounds of whimpers that were recorded in the room, almost as if the nurse's victims were showing up.
Oh, that's terrible. Because it definitely sounds like she took great pleasure in causing pain.
Mm-hmm. And again, we know that allegedly that has been a claim. I don't know if I even need to say allegedly, because it was recorded in the 60s. You can see the episode still. but it is a controversial place. So that's the generic evidence. Those are the specific hauntings of the Mayflower building. As I said, this place operates as a haunted attraction, but there are multiple facets to it. So to answer our question of would you enter this place a paranormal phenomena, I think we have to break it down. Because they also operate as a museum. So there's 1 daytime museum, 2 nighttime haunted attraction, or 3 nighttime ghost hunt. I would go to the museum during the day. I don't think I would give credence to the haunted attraction, and I definitely would not go on a ghost hunt.
So I think I would go definitely to the museum. I would walk the grounds, and walk through, the hospital and such. Probably during the day, definitely not during the night. Only because of the reports of scratching, objects being thrown and being pushed. Now, granted, that could also happen during the day, but I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to kind of walk around. But yeah, I don't know if I'd want to give credence to the haunted house though.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's too controversial for my liking. Would you touch the airplane?
I would not touch the airplane.
I wouldn't touch the airplane either.
Only because it was somebody that was suffering greatly in life.
Yeah.
And that their spirit cares deeply about this airplane. So why would I cause any more discomfort?
That's how I feel. These people have been through enough. If you want your Fisher-Price airplane. And the interesting thing is it's a Fisher-Price airplane. And Fisher is a shadow ghost as well.
Which is very, interesting.
It's probably a coincidence. Just interesting. If you're listening and you've been to this haunted house, I would love to know what your thoughts on it were, or if you've been to the museum. It's not that far from my parents' house in Eastern PA, so we could potentially go sometime that we're there. Yeah,
I would be very interested in visiting for sure. But
we'll have to check it out. Maybe we can do a follow-up podcast on these haunted places that we've been in person and our experiences.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next Thursday to see what ghost and haunt we discuss next.